This is my presentation that I made on the Indian in the cupboard. I chose the Indian in the cupboard because I'm a very artistic person, and I find the positive things that we can learn and seeing the negative things in society through the media that we put out. So I chose the Indian in the cupboard. A little bit about the Indian in the cupboard. Sorry about that. A little bit about the Indian in the cupboard. It's about a little boy who finds an Indian figure and it comes to life. So this little boy's name is Omri, and he starts out at school and he's given a project where he has to do a presentation on someone from the past in history. And so he decides that he's going to do his project. He comes to figure it out that he's going to do it on this little Indian named Little Bear. And so basically, this movie is just about Omri going through trying to learn more about Little Bear, and Little Bear ends up running into different people through this cupboard. So Omri has this cupboard that Little Bear goes in, and that's how he comes to life. But before, he's a stick figure, so you can put all these stick figures in there, and they come to life. So this is how he figures out everything about Little Bear. A little synopsis about the movie that I watched. The movie was made in 1995. It was directed by Frank Oz, and it was written, the screenplayer was Melissa Matheson, and the whole movie was based off of the book by Lynn Reed Banks. So I just liked it because it was based off of a book. It just shows the depth that it wasn't just made to be a movie, that the things that happened in this book happened in the movie, and that it happened for a reason. So a little bit about the portrayal. So, like I said, there's this cupboard and you put all these figures in there and they come to life. And as a child would do, you don't just try it once to see what happens. The first time you put all these other figures in there and see what happens, and that's exactly what happens. The two people that I did a portrayal on that I found the most interesting and important in this case was the Native American, Little Bear, and the cowboy. But there's other characters in this movie that were in the cupboard that came out and came to life, but were very stereotypically portrayed. Darth Vader was there, and he was very much like Darth Vader in the movies, just, Darth Vader. But it was very stereotypical. There were people having fights with lightsabers. There was someone from the Renaissance in the tin outfit, like a guard, and specifically another person that had a little bit more screen time, but was very stereotypically portrayed was a medic from a war. He was very kind, unlike someone from war. He wasn't angry, but he was very kind. Just very much acted like a nurse, which you would expect, but it was just so much so that it just seems stereotypical. So the portrayal slimmed up of how I saw the Native Americans in the movie was that he was seen very strong, which is not wrong. He was seen as a fighter, which is also not wrong, but he was also seen at times as aggressive. They opened up the movie, and the first time Little Bear speaks, he's just very angry and yelling, and it just seems very aggressive. And while some of this is true, stereotypes are very much so bigger than life about how society actually is. And so I just found that these three things being what I saw as mainly portrayed about him was almost kind of wrong, because while this is how the Native Americans were, they also had more to them than just being angry and fighters. So that's how I saw the Native Americans. And I just thought it was interesting at the same time how much cowboys were also stereotypically portrayed. This is the cowboy. He always had a gun on him. He was seen as easily angered. He had a horse, also very stereotypical. He was also seen as a fighter and protective, not over the Indian at all. At the end of the movie, he starts to soften up a little bit with the Indian and care a little bit more, but he was not protective over him. He was just protective over himself, Omri, and his friend Patrick, um, just everyone, and generally towards the Native American, Little Bear. So what I saw that was correct versus incorrect, I basically, while this movie is it's actually very well done in how they portrayed the Native American and how they portrayed Little Bear, they also stereotypically portrayed him at times. One thing that bothered me is when the movie opened, he was seen with teepees. There's a whole bunch of Native Americans. The movie opens with the stick figures and teepees, and then when Little Bear comes to life, the first thing Omri does is give him a teepee. Which, while Native Americans did create teepees, there was also a lot more to them than that, and I feel like that's a very surface level thing. Because yes, it was a great invention and it's amazing. There just was more to them that they created than that. Um, Again, they were also stereotypically seen as a fighter and aggressive, which yes, they did fight and they could be aggressive, but that was not them all the time. Um, I also thought it was funny that they Little Bear, Omri assumed that Little Bear couldn't speak English. And this could not be further than the truth because when the Europeans came, they stripped the Native Americans of their culture, their language. Many Native American languages don't exist today because it was stripped from them, because they were forced to conform to society and to learn English. Um, so much so that I found it in the movie weird that at times when he would be talking, when Little Bear would be talking and it wasn't in English, he was speaking Spanish at times. At one point, they are trying to find the key to the cupboard and they send Little Bear to get it, and they tell him that there's a rat under there and that he's going to be big and that you need to be careful. But to find Little Bear when he runs into the rat, he starts saying aquí, which is Spanish. And he also heavily uses the term amigo in the movie, which nowadays is pretty common, but I just don't know if at the time, since he comes out of the cupboard and thinks that he's coming from the 1700s, I just don't understand if that's accurate or if that's a stereotype. Um, but I just thought that it was wrong that they thought he couldn't speak English because that couldn't be further from the truth. At the beginning of the movie, he's also made out to be an ignorant person that he just doesn't understand. And then later in the movie, Patrick and Omri are watching a movie about cowboys and Indians, and the cowboys are killing all of the Indians. And Little Bear gets very, very angry and ends up shooting a bow and arrow at the cowboy. And he doesn't die, but he's very close to death. And so it just made him out to look like a killer. Because he was very aggressive and angry, but if you were understanding, you would understand why that would make sense. Like I said, the movie, though, I was surprised because they actually did a good job at times of explaining and portraying the Native Americans, Little Bear. They were very open and honest at the beginning of the movie. Little Bear said that they were slaves for the Europeans and they went and fought against the French, um, which they were. They were very heavily slaves in society and on the missions and stuff. So while they only touched it a little bit while talking about the French, that's correct. They were used as slaves. Um, Little Bear had his bow and arrow, which the Native Americans created their own tools, so that was very accurate. He talks about building a longhouse, which they did. They created those. Um, he talks about being an Iroquois, which is a real tribe, and I thought that that was really cool, that was very culturally appropriate. You saw him cooking meat, which seems a little bit weird, but it was something that they did. They were hunter-gatherers, and so they started out being more of gatherers, but they ended up being hunters more too. Specifically, he ended up telling stories and talking about ceremonies and coming of age if you're a young man coming back to the village and being of age. This is seen he is chanting around a fire and dancing, and that is very culturally appropriate for Native Americans at their ceremonies. So while it was only a short clip, and he is by himself, it was very accurate. And he also has a lot of tattoos, which is also accurate. They were very culturally, tattoos were accepted because it told the stories of what was happening on your body. And lastly, just what I learned about through this whole movie. Um, I feel like it's summed up through the last quote of the movie, the last two sentences. Omri is talking about, he's doing his presentation in class about Little Bear and Native Americans. And he says, I will never know where he is or how he is, but now I don't worry about him anymore. I think Little Bear will have lots of children and he will teach them everything. He will always take care of his people. And I just feel like this is very accurate. Native Americans are very family oriented, community oriented people through their tribes, and they're very kind in their tribes and stuff. They're not always aggressive people, and that they're smart and that they do have big families. And that when they are aggressive or when they do fight, it's to take care of their people and to protect themselves. And so I just felt that that was a very good way to end the movie, and that how they ended up portraying Little Bear as kind and helpful in the rest of the movie and accepting. He accepted Omri. He said, when I go back, I will call you my nephew, and just how accepting he was and how they ended up portraying him well. Thank you for watching my presentation. I hope you enjoyed.